Warm greetings to one and all. Let's wait for a couple of minutes while we admit the rest of them. So once again, this is Dr. Anita Sarjan, your MC for the session. If you wish to claim your certificate for the same, kindly visit our website, which is www.onlinedentistry.in/9 p.m. and register for the same. Online dentistry has been the pioneers in providing dental education via both online and offline platforms. The motto we preach is to redefine dental education. It has been over 14 years that online dentistry have been conducting sessions for clinical practitioners across the globe. Established in the year 2008, so far we have covered over 203 offline courses and we have conducted 1,022 online courses with an enormous amount of more than 30,000 followers on our platform. Let me proudly introduce the CEO of online dentistry, Dr. Binuti Abraham. He's one of the finest practitioners in town, an orthodontist by profession, a passionate photographer, and he owns his private practice at Kerala Dental Clinic, Alva. Moving on to the academic head of online dentistry, Professor Dr. Joby Peter. Currently, he's the HOD of Department of Pediatric Dentistry at Anu Dental College, who preaches the philosophy to catch them young and watch them grow. Over the years, we have grown dynamically, launching 10 centers in different parts of India. On popular demand, we are relaunching our new 3-day session on November 24th, 25th, and 26th at Cochin. We are open for fresh registrations via our website. The latest addition to our courses, the 1-year comprehensive and advanced master training program on interceptive and myofunctional orthodontics, has been initiated successfully with 2 batches. This is a multidisciplinary approach with intense training and hands-on session. Our program is now a fellowship program on interceptive and myofunctional orthodontics, which is accredited by the Manipal University College, Malaysia, which is also a sister concern of Mahi University. Herein, 2 of the modules will be happening in Malaysia, along with the graduation ceremony and a certificate distribution as well. We are a batch full now, and we are waiting registrations for the 2024 batch via our website. You can always feel free to reach to us on our WhatsApp number or visit us on our website, www.onlinedentistry.in, or else you can mail us on onlinedentistry.in@gmail.com. Online dentistry have been conducting sessions all over India for the past 14 years. During the lockdown, we started conducting online sessions to benefit the practitioners, which have been received with great appreciation from the dental fraternity. In the year 2023, we are relaunching the same by providing free advanced learning CDs under the title Online Dentistry at 9 p.m. So without further ado, let me move on to introducing the speaker for the day, Dr. Priya. She secured both her BDS and MDS in conservative dentistry from Government Dental College, Trivandrum. She worked as the assistant professor at Amada School of Dentistry previously. And right now, she's a reader of Department of Conservative Dentistry at Malabar Dental College and Research Center. She's also a member of Indian Association of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontics, as well as Conservative Dentistry and Endodontic Society of Kerala. She's also got several international and national publications to her credit, and she's also the review board member of Conservative Dentistry and Endodontic Journal. Proudly welcoming the star of the session, ma'am, the session is all yours.
Thanks, my dear. Just let me make one small correction there. I'm the head of the department at Malabar Dental College in the Conservative Department. So let me just start with the screen share part. Let me beg your pardon, I'm not a techie at all. The only equipment I can successfully handle are related to endo. Anything else, I always need these kids' help. So how is it looking now, Anita? Am I good?
Yes, ma'am. You're good to go.
Yeah. And my voice is audible, clear, all good?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, super. So Very good evening to everyone who is listening to me and watching me right now. And this session is, I have titled it Pitfalls in Rotary Endodontics, but trust me, 1 hour is too less a time to actually take you through a total journey of Rotary Endodontics. So what we have right now here, I have condensed it all into a nutshell as to the most critical points which you need to know about this vast topic. All right. Now, before I go on any further, 3 cheers to India on what we have achieved today. The Chandrayaan-3 made a soft landing successfully on the moon. It's a moment of pride for each one of us as Indians. And it's a wonderful opportunity that this happening on the same day as such a momentous thing. I must thank at the outset my very beloved senior colleague, Dr. Joby, as well as Dr. Binu, wonderful human beings, both of them, and the tech support, Dr. Anita and Dr. Joby. Thank you so much for having me here. And I hope the next 45 minutes to 1 hour will be really useful to the people who are watching. Okay, so now in the brochure, we had promised you that we would be talking about these. Yeah, we're good. These topics, or these were the key points of discussion that we had taken up. Now, why I have chosen these is because without these, you're not getting anywhere in Rotary. All right, these are the basic things on which your entire Rotary endodontics is structured. All right, now we'll be going, again, let me tell you, we cannot cover these entire topics. These are just few points from Rotary, and on these topics, I will be giving you 2 takeaway points per head. All right, so that is as per the time constraint. Given more time, we could have had a longer discussion, but for now, I'll be giving you 2 takeaway points on each of these. Okay. I've just put this here because, see, for us as endodontists, Rotary is the in thing, the happening thing. But there was a time that Rotary was the in thing or the happening thing in terms of mobile phones. That was several years ago, probably another century ago. And at that time, having a rotary phone in your phone, I remember when we got it as, in my childhood, how exciting it was to be, using that rotary thing. And now nobody even remembers what it looks like. I wonder how many of you have actually seen one functional. So anyway, right now we are at the phase of endodontics where Rotary is the happening thing. And if you're using anything less than that, that's the hand files and all, you probably require a time machine to, jump to the next century. That is how it is, but we don't know how time is going forward, and probably at some point, even this might get obsolete. Yeah, before I go to that, I want a little input from all of you who are watching me. I want you to tell me what you think is the greatest advantage of Rotary endodontics. I want you to go to the chat box and type those comments in, and I would request Dr. Anita to just help me, with the responses. I would like to know the most responses. What do you think is the biggest advantage of Rotary, the edge that Rotary has? Come on, I'm waiting.
Yeah, guys, come on. We have 42 participants. Just go to chat box and put in your answers. Ma'am, yeah, ma'am. Less time from Dr. Manisha, less time from Dr. Rajendran, time saving and quick from Dr. Nihal. It's a time savior. And from Dr. Lakshmi, let's help us find the treatment sooner. Ease of doing RCTs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm happy that, thanks a lot for that response. Right. Now, I am extremely happy that none of you have, a couple of the popular misconceptions, or at least you haven't projected that here. What you have projected here is time. That is definitely the advantage. But, coupled with time, one of the common misconceptions people have regarding Rotary endodontics is that it is more effective. It can give a better prognosis. Okay, I don't know how many hearts I'll be breaking by saying this, but Rotary is definitely, it's neither more effective nor gives you a better prognosis as compared to your hand filing system. That is the hard truth. All right. Now, the success of instrumentation or cleaning and shaping, if you take, it all depends on how well you know and understand the principles of cleaning and shaping and your ability to execute those principles. It doesn't matter the means by which you get there. Whether you use Rotary or hand, the ultimate aim for us is, one, You have to get out everything that is there inside the canal. You don't want anything remaining in there, whether it be vital tissue, whether it be organisms, the toxins left behind by them, whatever it is, you're taking it out. Second is you want to create a conducive shape. Why? Definitely, even though we are attempting our best to, instrument it, remove everything possible, there are still going to be several nooks and crannies where your instrument will not reach. And hence the term cleaning and shaping. That is, whatever is missed out by the instrument is usually taken care of by the chemical part of it. So you need your irrigants working along with you. And unless and until you have a conducive shape, these irrigants are not going to reach up to the most critical areas, these nooks and crannies, as we said. So we create a continuous tapering shape. That is a basic one of the basic objectives as given by Shilda. So you have to have that shape, you have to remove the contents, and that pretty much takes care of everything else. So if you have this right, everything else naturally follows. So whether you achieve this with hand or rotary doesn't really matter in terms of your execution of the RCT or its long-term success. What does matter, however, is, as you very correctly pointed out, it saves you time and your energy. So you're saving on your resources. That is the greatest advantage that Rotary has. Nothing else. Everything else, what you may consider, doesn't really work. All right. So moving on to the next one that we're talking about is, okay, that was just an animation to tell you about the anything that. Right. Next, we'll talk about the heterogenic errors. Now, there are several errors that you can create, but in rotary instrumentation, the most critical ones, the most significant ones are 1, instrument separation, and 2, canal transportation. Now we'll take this one by one. Okay, let's go to instrument separation first. Now in both of these, I will be telling you 2 techniques to prevent them and 2 means to manage them. Okay. Now instrument separation. These are the 2 ways in which you can prevent an instrument separation. Now trust me, every endodontist, everyone who has done RCT, forget about being endodontist, everyone who has done an RCT completely understands the emotion that is associated with an instrument separation. All right. I'll tell you a very common scenario, very, very common scenario. You pick up this instrument, you put it into the file, into the hand, the endomotor hand piece, and you're like, how many times have I used this? I'm not really sure. When was the last time? Okay, no problem. I think it will go for 1 more. I don't see any bends. I don't see any chips. Looks kind of okay. No unbinding. Flutes are looking fine, looking brand new. Must have taken it out the other day. I'll use it just this 1 more time. Or should I? Maybe just this 1 more time. Something is telling you, but you're still okay. I'll just use it 1 more time. This last time, and I promise I'm going to throw it out. And you put it into the canal and ting, it goes, and that resonates somewhere over here. Okay. You can feel your heartbreak. You know it is broken. All right. Most of the time, you get a gut feeling that this thing is going to break. It comes probably by subconscious things which are registered and your clinical acumen or whatever. But I recently, read a quote and I loved it so much. It says, gut feelings are actually your guardian angels giving you warning signs. So anyway, no, that was just, one of the, on the lighter side of things. But how can you actually prevent instrument separation? One thing that you need to do is you need to ensure that you do not use the files repeatedly beyond their capacity. Okay, now here there is one more thing that I would like to put to the audience. Anita, if you don't mind, I would want you to just check the chat box. Audience, just please type in how many times can we use a rotary file? Be it any system, one common number I want from you. How many times are we supposed to use the rotary file after which you should discard it? Can we have any number?
I'm waiting, ma'am. From Marcus Mullins, 506. From Aparna, from Dr. Aparna, 6. Mostly 5, 4. Ideally, each patient.
Okay.
Ma'am, these are the
excellent. I would love to meet the person who just sent me that ideally each patient should get a new set. Okay, anyway, that's fantastic. Now, do you guys realize that rotary instruments are manufactured as disposable items? They are consumables. They're supposed to be, discarded after every use. Unfortunately, so. But then, we live in India. We may be, landing the Chandrayaan-3 on the moon, but we will recycle our disposable cups. We will recycle our plastic straws. We will recycle every plastic bag that you have ever got as, wrapping from the shop. In fact, most of our kitchens will have a bag which will contain plastic bags, which are kept for later use. So we are, we are the masters of reuse and recycle and extracting the maximum out of something. So single use doesn't really make sense. Okay, I totally am with you on that. But then, like you said, the most common sentiment here, I guess, is somewhere between 4, 5, and 6. So this depends upon the type of file that you're using. Many of the files which we have recently, they are, blue wire system or heat treated and stuff like that. They are, kind of resistant to fracture. So my personal take, now this is not based on any scientific literature or anything like that. I'm telling you from my clinical experience, 4 cases, it's kind of safe. However, there are a couple of things about that. After each use, it is always good to make, that is the way I can keep track of how many cases I have used. There is this system which has many of the systems which have silicone stoppers with petals attached, which you can detach and all that. But that don't really work for me. What works is I make a small mark on the handle. One small tiny groove with the handle, 4 marks, and that is time for it to go. Goodbye. Sometimes it doesn't always, wait for 4 marks. You know that you have stressed this file a bit too much, discard it immediately. All right, that is the way it works. And make sure you clean and autoclave between each use. So 3 to 4, sometimes it is a single use. That's it. So, and even without this, sometimes, okay, you may have used the file only once and it is for a relatively, reasonable or moderately curved. That's it. It was not a severely curved canal or anything. And you feel that it can use several times. But if ever you get a gut feeling, there is a chance that this might break, please, my dear friends, you need to discard it. Because every time I have got that gut feeling, every time that file has either fractured, now I've started listening to my, instincts. So now, thank God, touch wood, there are no longer any fractures in my practice. So yeah, discard them after a specific number of uses. Some of the okay, let's I think we'll move a little bit faster, otherwise we will not be able to cover the desired topics. Now the second point here is glide path. Now this is going to come again and again, so I will explain about glide path after the next couple of slides. All right, now this is the best thing to do about instrument fracture or separation, that is prevented. But in case of fracture, what do you do? It has happened, so there are only 2 ways of managing. Okay, 2 ways to prevent it. There are 2 ways of managing, 2 acceptable ways of managing it. You need to either bypass it or you need to retrieve it. Okay, now we are talking about the crude conventional technique and you're talking about the advanced technique. Now, if you're in a practice where rubber dam is the norm and you're working under at least magnification loops or preferably a dental operating microscope, then you can easily retrieve it because you have, visibility. You have access, and if you have any of the retrieval kits, or even many times, if it is a case such as have the radiograph here, something straightforward as that, then you can just use your ultrasonic tips even. Your regular scalar tips, if you can get it deep enough, that is enough. Sometimes even that works. What I mean is that if it is not lodged too much into it, it has not completely engaged into it, it can come out very easily. However, not everyone is practicing with a microscope and a rubber dam. So in such cases, retrieval may not really be a viable option. It doesn't work that way. So the next best option that you have is to bypass it. Okay. Now, bypassing simply means that you will use another instrument to create an alternate pathway along the side of the fractured instrument. Now, why you want to do this is because your instrument is, as in this picture, it is stopped a little short of your working length. So beyond that instrument, there is still uncharted territory, there is still organisms, there is still infection, and you haven't been able to get there. So you need to go beyond this, reach there, clean that part also, which is why bypassing is necessary. I personally prefer an 8K file or a 10K file. That usually works for me. Please do not use another rotary instrument. Please do not use H files because both of these are highly susceptible to fracture in such cases. So K files will work best, and they must be pre-curved. They must be used very gently. And even before all this, yeah, I should have started with that. I should have led with that. The first thing that you require for bypassing a fractured instrument, a separated instrument, is tons of patience. There is no rushing it. Take it really slow. If you are flustered, if you're upset, stop your work. You're not going to get anywhere. recall the patient in another appointment, and only then work on it. Work with absolute peace of mind. Take your time. Work with enough of lubricants. Take your time. And these kind of instruments are pretty easy to retrieve. The trouble comes when you have fractured something beyond the curvature. All right, it is not at all an easy task. Now you have a tooth that is, it's got a curvature like that, a canal like that, and then the instrument has fractured in this segment. Becomes a bit tricky. All right, now in such cases, suppose you're trying to bypass it. One small tip that I can give you is, now, okay, this is the fractured segment inside the canal that is here. You're entering from here and try to pass your instrument under this in the inside curvature. Okay, why? Because the moment it goes here, then there is a soft dentin there, which will probably cause it to go straight and perforate rather than, go above this and like that. Whereas here, there is this instrument that is hitting it. So there is some resistance. So it will try to move to a little less resistant area, which is probably the canal. So it is slightly easier to slide your instrument underneath than over that. All right. But once you get at least a 10K file to go up to it, then you're safe. Once one instrument goes, then you can slowly work your way. And by then, this segment usually gets slightly disengaged, giving you more room to work. Many of the times it can come out. Curvature sometimes prevents it from coming out, but you can still do a reasonably good cleaning and shaping. Because like I said, it is not whether you have embedded some, you have to understand something. The instrument that you have used is sterile. It's a sterile bit of nickel titanium, which is one of the most biocompatible materials that is there. It cannot really cause too much of a problem. The problem comes in the form of, legal issues, medical legal issues. So you have to use your discretion. You have to be at your diplomatic best in explaining this to the patient. You have to tell the patient that definitely the treatment is not exactly as how you would have wanted it to be, but it does not influence the outcome much, provided you're able to bypass or retrieve it. Now, the trouble comes when you are not able to do either of this, in which case we are forced to sometimes obturate up to the level of the segment, in which case you definitely need to inform the patient of the possibility of a secondary infection because you haven't cleaned and shaped beyond this instrument. Now, in the same context, now, one of the instruments which I have fractured most commonly, and in my interaction with my colleagues, is a very common instrument that fractures is the 6x20 or the F1. Okay, and the 6x20 doesn't belong to my kit anymore. I don't know why they even manufacture that thing, because it is designed to break. In my experience, it is designed to fracture, or maybe use it for a couple of cases, 2 cases, and then chuck it out. But 6x20 is a disastrous instrument. So anyway, for those of us who are following the manufacturer's thing, so the F1, F2, those of you understand that F1 is again a file that has a very high chance to fracture. Among all the files, those are the ones that me and my colleagues have felt are very commonly fractured. So in such cases, one relief that you have is that you have done your initial cleaning, you have cleaned it up to size 20, and only then this fracture has happened. So there is not a heavy load of organisms there. You already done enough of your irrigation with that. That is one prayer that you have. Second is you place an intracanal medicament. So you're hoping that the medicament works, in which case this bit of night eye, if you've done a reasonably good cleaning and shaping, one bit of night eye is not going to influence your outcome so much. All right, you still need to have inform the patient and all that. That is definitely there, but then it is not a very significant thing as compared to what we are coming to next. Unfortunately, this particular thing, it hasn't really got much of relevant, or we haven't given it any importance, because how many of you have actually are worried about canal transportation when you're working with Rotary? We're always skeptical about separation. You're careful about that. We're all totally aware about that. But many of the times we are not even aware of the amount of canal transportation that actually happens. And trust me, the cases which fail, which develop post-treatment disease, are more likely because of such a mishap than because of an instrument separation. All right, separated instrument cases coming with secondary infection, that must be maybe a 10K file and no cleaning and shaping was done and it was left as such. Such kind of cases will definitely fail, like I told you. But more importantly, it is cases like this. Sometimes the canal looks perfectly obturated and all on the radiograph, but what has actually happened is the original anatomy of the canal has been altered. All right, now here I would like to introduce you to some, one concept. I need you to get this right into your head. the rotary instrument, it always rotates about an axis. It can only go like that. It is not going to hit any wall. It is not going to seek out the distal or the buccal or the mesial wall of the canal. It will simply rotate on an axis. If you take it to one side, it will hit that wall. If you take it to the other side, it will hit that wall. That's it. All it does is rotate about its own axis. All right. And here you have to remember that close to 90% of the root canals are not round in cross section. Okay. One thing that can drill this really home. This is one exercise that I would like to suggest to all of you. Go collect mandibular premolars. Okay, go collect plenty of mandibular. You will get plenty. People are extracting them left, right, center for orthodontic purposes. So you get enough of them. Put them on a wax sheet and shoot radiographs. Shoot radiographs with them in a mesiodistal direction. Then you will understand what I am talking about. All right, these. And also, okay, for the same teeth, take it in a buccolingual direction also. From the buccolingual, the regular exposure of the radiograph, what you're going to see is, okay, one small narrow line, sometimes one wide line, maybe it is tapering and all, that's perfectly all right. But you will never believe what you will find in that, decent looking thing when you take it from the mesodistal direction. These are just some of the pictures that I randomly picked and posted. What I'm trying to tell you is that the shape of the canal is far from round. It is never circular in cross section, never round in cross section. All right. And what are you trying to do here when you're using rotary? You are actually trying to create a circular shape. Okay. Now, how much of a circle can you scribe in such an area? Now, imagine you have an oval kind of a shape. Okay. You have the big diameter, the long diameter, and the small diameter. Okay. Now, you can go up to the small diameter and then a little bit more, isn't it? Can you go up to the long diameter? Can you enlarge up to that area? Now, by the time you enlarge so much, what are you going to get on either side? The mesial and distal, you're going to strip, right? So it is not possible for us to create a perfect round shape to accommodate this entire oval nature of the canal. So instead, most of the time what you do is, you will create a small circle in the center. There is a lot of the canal left on either side. So you have actually created a shape inside of the existing shape and you have completely altered the anatomy. Now, we're coming to the apical area. Most of the time, you're actually creating your own channel. So as is evident in this video, this is something that is a bit more visible to you even in clinical cases. There is a slight curvature of the mesial canals, which the person hasn't followed. These are all pictures taken from the maybe textbooks or internet variably. Okay, none of these are my pictures. I've just taken them and I pasted them. Right. So this one tells the story very beautifully. There is a slight curvature of the mesial canal, which was not followed. And as a result, what has happened? It has actually created a new canal like that. Now, this case is going to fail in no time. I promise you this case is going to fail for two reasons. One, you have actually created a new space, and that new space, it is highly unlikely, because it is in that slanting direction, highly unlikely that area is round even, and you will not get a proper seal over there. You need an apical seal, right? It is nearly impossible to get an apical seal unless maybe you're using a bioceramic sealer or something like that. That's it. And that is one thing. You haven't got a proper apical seal, so you have set up a channel for further leakage. Second thing is that original canal there, that is where the original inflammation or infection, whichever it was, that is present. It is still there. You haven't touched it. So unless that is resolved, is the case going to heal? Likely no. Now, the body has an amazing capability for healing, granted, but even then, this case is more likely to fail than the other one that you see on top with that instrument there. Because that instrument there, it can actually be bypassed. That looks like a case which can be bypassed. All right. And once you bypass that and you have cleaned and shaped properly, it is not going to give you any trouble. Whereas this one, even though on a sudden look, it looks okay, gone almost up to the apex and all. That's what you would think, but that case is most likely going to fail. Now, how can you prevent this? So that is what we're talking about. The entire canal getting transported or the apex getting transported. That happens because we haven't really understood the morphology of the canal that you're working on. All right. Every canal that you work on, get a sense of what it feels like. Use your hand files to sense it out. That digital sense, that the tactile sensation. The tactile perception tells you what the actual shape of the canal is, and as far as possible, you need to try and retain that shape, which means you cannot always depend entirely on one set of rotary instruments. They are not going to help you. You need to use additionally hand instrumentation. You need to use different file systems. Sometimes reciprocating works. The self-adjusting file that had come up, at one time as the happening thing, and that is one thing that can adapt to the canal shape. But then we haven't heard much from them recently, and besides, they need to get a little bit more economical before we can, totally accept them into our practice. Right now, they are priced too high. So apart from that, you can actually, all right. So the mechanical aspect is kind of limited here. You can use different kinds of rotary files and complement it with your hand instrumentation. But more importantly, you have to rely heavily on irrigation. Decent irrigant techniques. The irrigant, when I say irrigation, by default, we mean sodium hypochlorite. All right, sodium hypochlorite, EDTA solution. There are no alternatives to these two. These are staples on the endodontist tray. They have to be there. Now, suppose you are worried about hypochlorite accidents and or how will I flush so much of hypochlorite? Okay, you get that mental satisfaction on flushing a lot of fluid, lot of irrigant, everything is coming bubbling out. You get that thing. Use saline. Liberally use saline. Patient will tolerate that salty taste. But hypochlorite, you have to be a little bit gentle. You can flush it only if you're using rubber dam. If you're not, you cannot really flush it. But still, I'll tell you one, easy alternative is to place one drop in the chamber and agitate it with your instrument as well, with your hand instrument. Okay. Anyway, I digressed a little bit from the topic there. So yeah, basically you have to choose the instrument wisely. When you have canals which are not exactly round, or which, I'll tell you what, the mesial canals of mandibular molars are more or less okay, because by that, usually they are narrow. So by the time you enlarge it to the requisite size, they are kind of taken care of. What you really have to watch out for are the premolars, all right, mandibular and maxillary premolars, especially when your access is kind of conservative. Nowadays, everybody is telling you to remove as less tooth structure as possible. We should conserve tooth structure. We should not cut too much and all that. No. So with that limited access and this kind of a canal, you actually have a bottleneck created there. So because of that bottleneck, your instrument will not be able to freely go in the rest of the area. This will in fact direct this restricted access. It will direct your rotary instrument to one particular direction, and it will keep on cutting only in that particular direction, resulting in a lot of these mishaps. All right. So choose your instrument wisely for that. And then again, one way of minimizing this, I will not say prevent it, minimizing this is the glide path. So what is this glide path? What is this? No, wait, I missed one slide in between. I will also tell you the management of transportation before we go on to glide path. So two ways of managing. If you have, by chance, you have made this transportation, or even if it is not transported yet, but still you have this kind of a canal and you have only worked with these kind of, irrigants and not. The next thing that you must do is use a special obturation technique. You cannot use a single cone. In 90% of the mandibular premolars, you cannot use a single cone. All right. So I would suggest that after every case, you place your single cone. You're planning to obturate with single cone. You place your cone exactly as matching to your last apical instrument. Please use a spreader. The smallest one, the yellow one, or the red one, whichever. White doesn't really work. It's a useless instrument. Some of this instrument, I always wonder, why do they even manufacture? Like the 10H file, for heaven's sake. 15H file, I'm scared to use. I will not touch a H file that is smaller than 20. It breaks like anything, and then they come up with 10 size H file. Okay, beside the point. So what I was telling is, always see if there is room for one more cone. All right, lateral compaction is not a bad idea at all in many of these cases. Like you have these mandibular molars. All right, distal canal, usually they are so wide, you will prepare them up to F3. All right, and you think you're happy, and you'll very happily place, and you're getting a tug back, everything is fine. But after that, just try using a yellow spreader, push it onto the buccal or the lingual side. Very gently, you try to push it. 70% of the time, you will find that there is a space there. All right. So always make sure that this lateral space is filled. The better technique, when you know for a fact that there is a lot of this kind of uneven spaces and all, is the thermoplasticized obturation technique. That you cannot really go wrong with. Vertical compaction is also fine, but it is a technique sensitive thing. You have to really know how to do that vertical compaction. Right. Thermoplasticized is a little bit more easier than that. It's expensive, but it's easier. So anytime you're dealing with these kind of irregular canals and all, just one rotary instrument and the single cone, please avoid that. Either you must be, really well versed with the access so that you have access to the entire area. For example, in a C-shaped canal, even the same thing applies even to there. All right, in C-shaped canal and all, don't even think of a rotary instrument. It's not going to work anyway. You're just going to enlarge one small portion. What are you going to do with the rest of it? Okay, so copious hand instrumentation, copious irrigation, all of that will take care of your, irregular canals and transportations, if any. And if it is an apical transportation where you have, this is also one very frequent thing with the rotary instruments initially, especially files which are a little bit aggressive. Take your F2 or F3, for instance. In the beginning phases, how many of you have actually tried to use this and you feel that your hand is being pulled into the canal? The file is just screwing right into the canal like that and it is going out of your hand. If you observe carefully, that does happen many times. So make sure that you have absolute good control over your file over the handpiece, that is, before it goes into the canal. Make sure it cannot slip out of your hand. It cannot get pulled. You decide where your instrument stops. Exactly at the working length. Okay. Now, having said that, even so, several times what happens is it goes just a wee bit beyond of what you had wanted. So you ideally would want your working length to stop where you have the canal that is beautifully tapering up to this juncture that is called the minor diameter. You have that apical constriction, after which the canal is going to widen out into a funnel, opening onto the apical foramen per se, right? So you don't want to go into that funnel part. You would actually stop right short of that. Beyond that and all, your patency file and your irrigation will take care of. Your rotary instrumentation doesn't have to go there. But in case that happens, then again, the problem is that you will not be able to get a good seal. If you had something like this, you would get an apical matrix that if that is gone, anything that you put might go into the periapical. So in such cases, always keep some bioactive material handy, such as MTA or MTA. The current recent ones, they are fast setting, right? So you can just place a bit of cotton, make the patient wait for a little while outside, get done with the next patient, then call this patient back in and continue with your obturation. Or else, if it's old school, then you have to get the patient come back the next day. You also have several other bioactive materials like biodentine, and lots of people are, inventing these things on a daily basis. I feel every day there is one new product in the market. So you can use one of these to create that apical stop and then continue with the rest of your obturation. Okay, so that is how you would manage irregular canals or transportations per se. Which that's the thing that we're talking about. We're going on talking about the glide path, right? Now, glide path is something that is so basic that it is forgotten or omitted. It is too basic. That is the thing. Okay. What is a normal sequence of RCTs? Okay, you have given the LA and then you have placed the rubber dam or not. You have initiated the access opening. You have removed whatever you put, some bits of pulp comes out, some blood is coming out. You just put some saline and okay, fine. It is like kind of okay, kind of controlled. Then you put in your file, you determine your working length. Okay. Your 10K file is what goes in first. Definitely that is the first. That is your rover. All right. That has to go first. Only then anything else can go. Right. So the 10K file goes, it says, yes, this is the canal. And I think this is the apex and it comes back. Right. And then you have to determine the working length to confirm this. So I would suggest a combination of apex locator and radiograph. That is, again, in some ways, I'm a little bit old school. All right. I prefer to use a combination of both. And anyway, you have determined this working length, which is usually at the apical constriction or the minor diameter. Now, after this, what do? You determine the work length, say 20 mm. Fine. What do you do next? You take your rotary and start working. Right? Never do that. All right. The first thing that you must do before you insert a rotary file is to create a path for this rotary file to glide up to the working length. A rotary file should never have to cut up to the working length. It cannot do that for two reasons. Rotary files, most of them are designed with a non-cutting tip. The tip is not supposed to cut, because imagine a drill that is going right in your air rotor bar. Imagine putting that into the canal. What's going to happen? It is going to create its own channel, right? We don't want that. We want the instrument to follow the original canal, the original anatomy. Hence, most of these tips won't cut. So what is the point in, trying to make this thing cut? The tip is not going to cut. And another thing is the unprepared, untouched canal. What do you expect the shape of that canal to be like? It is not going to be tapering anyway. Definitely. It is going to be more or less tubular. Okay, maybe parallel in some areas, then it may become wide, then it may become narrow. It can do a lot of these things. So it is never going to be an even path. It is going to be highly uneven. Agree? and you are going to use your rotary instrument to do this. Now, remember what I said. What is the rotary instrument going to do? It is going to rotate about its axis. Okay. Now, there is this constricted area, and your rotary instrument is trying to go through this area. How many points of contact do you think this instrument will have at any moment simultaneously? It is going to come in contact with several areas of the canal wall at once, simultaneously, right? Now imagine you have pressure from one side. You have some sort of pressure coming from one side. What builds up inside you? Work pressure. What comes? Stress. Family pressure. What builds up? Even more stress. You have more pressure coming from other ways, several other new points, so many different points everywhere. You're getting so much of pressure. What is going to happen to you? So much of stress that at the end of it, you're going to break down. Same thing happens to a file. You cannot stress it beyond a limit. Understood? Now, how do you know how much that file is capable of withstanding? We don't really know, right? So you have to ensure that there are not too many pressure points. All right. It can contact a few of the points, but not so many simultaneously. You got that much? So this is just a very analogous way of telling it. I'm not going scientifically here. I'm just telling you in a practical point of view so that you can understand what the end result has to be. So all I'm telling you is, the why and how, and not exactly the science behind that. Right. So you want to avoid so many pressure points at one point on this file means you have to create a path which is kind of all right for this instrument to gently glide up to the working line. All right. It will do a little bit of cutting. It will do the shaping. It is what is going to do all the shaping, in fact. And once it is begun at shaping, the irrigant also can take over, and together they will do the cleaning wonderfully. But initially, it needs a clear path. That path, that preparation of that path is known as the glide path preparation. This glide path is what will guide. So if you can look at the first picture, this is the shape of the canal. You want to ensure that the instrument is staying inside that. You create that path very clearly so the instrument has no doubt it goes exactly where it is supposed to go. Right. So that is the glide path. And how do you prepare it? Simply by using your hand files. So even though I said rotary is the in thing and all that, hand files are not obsolete yet. They are very much a part of your repertoire. An endodontist tray is incomplete without the 10, 15, 20, and 25K files. Okay, 25 I will still grant, fine, not much, but without your 10, 15, and 20K files, you can. All right, the 10K goes and comes out. 15K also goes in, gets loose and comes out. In many of the cases, okay, after 15, you're safe. With the 15, you have prepared this, you can safely move on to your rotary. But in some of the canals which are really curved or which are extremely long, and which have difficult access. So your instrument is already stressed for, for example, you have the second molars and all that you have to curve, already it is bent as it is going in, then it has to bend again, those kind of cases. Anything like that, difficult access, curvatures, and extra long canals, make sure you enlarge it up to 20 before you go for your rotary. Okay. And if you don't believe in what I just said, again, take an extracted maxillary premolar. It will have a buccal canal and a palatal canal, right? In the buccal canal, insert your first rotary instrument directly. In the second one, do this glide path preparation, as I said, with your 10 and 15. And then you insert your rotary instrument. You will understand what the difference between it becomes really clear to you. Got it? So that is the glide path and the significance of it. So step 1, after your access preparation and working layer determination is preparation of the glide path, after which you can go on to your rotary instrumentation. Which brings us to, I'm sorry, yes. How do you choose the rotary instrument? Okay. So rotary instrumentation, like we said, the only factor here is how efficient it is. So efficient is a factor of its efficacy and time. Got it. So how do you judge the efficiency is based on how well it can cut. Definitely the cutting ability of the file is a factor. Okay. Now you have to weigh this against the flexibility that you want. Okay. Now, any file that you have on the market, if you look at it, it can either have a very aggressive cutting, which means in terms of rake angle, you can call it as a positive rake angle. All right. So it will engage the dentin and it will cut. But these files, they are generally less flexible. All right, they cannot be built. It is so far from what we know, they cannot, because the flute design is in such a way, the core is in such a way that it is cutting very well, means it cannot have so much of a flexibility and so much of a fracture resistance. All right. On the other hand, you have files which are extremely flexible. Some of them you can actually tie a knot with and they still won't fracture. There are plenty of such files. But the problem is that files which are so flexible, they will try to go into a canal and they're like, and they'll stop. They don't really cut. The cutting efficiency will be really poor with those. That's what I have seen with most of the file system that I use. So you have to have a balance between the two. Now, in terms of the Indian dental scenario, there is one third factor which you need to balance with it. That is the cost, the economic factor. Okay. Now, one of the best file systems which I have seen, which combines cutting efficiency and flexibility, are the. I'm not marketing any of these. Please take my words. I am not a brand ambassador of any of these. It's just my plain observation. Again, my personal observation as my opinion I would give to another. That's it. I'm not vouching for this, scientific backing or anything like that. Nothing like that. Just being honest with you with what I have seen in my clinical practice. One of the best systems, two of the best systems which combine these cutting efficiency flexibility are the ProTaper Gold system and the HighFlex EDM. Okay, these are the ones which I have used, and I know there are so many twisted files. So many others are there, reciprocal. Many of them have vouched for all of these. They say that, okay, they have both cutting efficiency. They don't fracture that easily also. That way. And in my practice, but even though I said these two, the third factor that I said is economy. These two are, they will cost much higher for you. In my practice, I have seen that there are actually several file systems which are priced maybe a third of this. Okay. Much less than these two, and still they do okay. All right, so for your regular cases with less than moderate or mild curvature and all, you can actually opt for any of these systems. The cost of it doesn't really matter. You just have to work with it. You have to, that's that feedback that the file will give you when you insert into a canal. If you feel that it is actually cutting too much, it is getting too aggressive, that is not for you. You have to have a file system that will stay in your palm. It will obey you. You have to have that control over the file. All right. So if it is a balance, if it is your kind of balance, like a lot of my colleagues, they try to use speeds of 400, which is as recommended by the manufacturer. But I am a 250 person. I will not exceed the endomotor speed more than 250. I cannot handle my fingers. The muscle tone of my fingers cannot handle the pull that comes from a speed that exceeds 250. Okay, so the endomotor, the settings also do matter a little bit in this one. Okay, so my speed is set at 250. My torque is always adjusted to the file. Again, torque setting, pretty important. All right, I'm not going to the endomotor thing, which, we were just actually fixated on the file part, because that will again take quite a long time. So yeah, just this quick thing. Make sure the speed is really comfortable to your setting, and make sure the torque is as per the manufacturer's instruction. Every file system comes with the card that tells you what is the torque setting that needs to be. Anything that exceeds it, it is likely to fracture. If you have auto reverse in your endomotor, fine, it will just rotate and come out. You don't have to bother too much. Setting is there, fine. Sometimes it doesn't have a auto reverse. It will just keep. So then you have to make sure that you pull it out before it gets engages somewhere and fractures. Got it. So yeah. With that having said, there are several systems. What you have to choose is something which will cut comfortably and you are completely in control of, and you can use for 3 cases and still it is keeping on cutting. Several systems, they dull very fast. That is also pretty important. You can use them for 1 or 2 cases. In the third cases, it loses cutting efficiency completely, which is again, it doesn't really work out for you. You need to be able to find a system that works comfortably for 3 to 4 cases and retains its cutting efficiency. About the flexibility part, it's important, but if you're using the glide path principle properly, then flexibility is something that we can always manage. Okay. And it's coming to your sequence of instruments. Again, 2 takeaway points regarding sequence of instruments. There are 2 ways in which you can decide the sequence of your instrument. One is the simple, straightforward way of following what the manufacturer tells you, but this applies to any sequence which follows the S1 to F3, F4, F5 kind of thing. ProTaper is the Dentsply people are who started off this thing, but then many of the other systems are also following the same terminology, because it is easier to follow an existing terminology rather than, invent something new, coin something new. So the problem with these variable taper instruments, so you understand what these ProTaper files and the other files are, right? That is, these are instruments which have a different taper in that same file. If you take one file, it will have a certain taper from the apical to 3 millimeters. Next 3 millimeters, it will have a different taper. Another 3 millimeters up, it will have even different taper. So there are different tapers. Tapers means the way in which the diameter changes. All right. So you have that changes in the taper within one single file system. That is your pro taper and the similar kind of any number. See, again, please do not consider this as a brand recommendation. I just took this picture off the net just to tell you that such a sequence exists. I'm not in any way endorsing this or recommending that this be used. So yeah, so in this case, it is pretty easy. You just have to go from S1 to S2 to F1. If it is loose, you have to go to F2. If that is also loose, you have to go to F3. If that is also loose, such as in case of lateral incisors and all, you may have to go to F4. Now, just as an aside, I don't usually recommend rotary instrumentation alone in anteriors, because how many of you actually have F4 and F5 in stock with you? Many people don't. And they would prefer to stop with F3. But believe me, F3 is too less an enlargement for an anterior. So either you must stock yourself with F4 and F5 and then work on the central incisors and canines with those. There again, make sure you have a good access preparation that allows for the taper of these instruments to fit in. Many times what happens is in the apical and middle area, there will be some space, but coronally you have this lock because they have this, widely tapering instruments, and your access preparation is so conservative. Again, like I said earlier, that will be a bottleneck. So you will feel that even the cone will feel like that. Your GP cone will feel, okay, perfect snug effect, tug back and all, but yeah, and you obturate. But if you take a radiograph, you'll understand there are actually spaces in between. Okay, those kind of issues are there if you do not match the size of your access opening to the instrument that you're using. Now, another problem with these kind of instruments, what I said now is not a problem, it's just something you have to watch out for. One definite problem with these instruments is that most of them, they have a very high taper of around 9% to 12% when it comes to the cervical cut. So there is this recent understanding of how the tooth functions in under occlusion. So from that, we know that the neck area or the cervical area of the tooth is the most critical area which determines its fracture resistance. Hence, the stress on removing as less tooth structure as possible from this cervical area. You want to preserve as much as dentine in the cervical area. It's called the pericervical dentine, the PCD. That's a huge talk of the town since the last few years. So that is why we currently opt for lesser taper instruments. The trend these days is to go for, and in my practice, I find that is safe enough. You have less chances of putting this tooth up for fracture at a later point of time. Okay, so when I mean the lesser taper, I mean the 4% and the 6%. Recently, you have 2% files also, which brings me to one particular point that I wanted to say regarding glide path, but I missed them. Glide path, I said about using hand files and all. Many of you may have come across Rotary glide files. The path file, by a lot of companies have that. They are actually good. I will not say anything against them. But as beginners, I will suggest, those of you who are beginners in this, I will suggest that you do not go for Rotary glide path files. Because as a beginner myself at one point of time, and I see with several beginners in my journey, glide path Rotary files gives you a false sense of security. It will not tell you how much of curvature there is in this canal, because it is so super flexible, it will go and it will come out. Your K file tells you, your K file will bend. It will tell you, okay, I'm bending buccally, I'm bending then distally, I'm coming out in an S shape, this is your canal. It tells you clearly what the picture is inside. Whereas your NITI glide file, it will cheat you. Okay, again, when I say 10K, it is a stainless steel 10K. I insist on a stainless steel 10K. All right. The NITI file, it is always coming back as it is gone in. So it is not telling you anything about the curvature. So you have this false sense, yeah, everything is fine. And then you use your next Rotary file and tuck, it breaks. Understood, because it has not really been cleared. The pathways has really not been cleared as much. Anyway, so that is just one thing that I found. But once you get a little bit more, expertise in this field, then you will be, good enough to know when to use a Rotary and when to use the hand. Once you get that discretion, it is fine. So coming back to Rotary, the sequence, normally we would go for, after your glide path preparation, the easiest sequence that you have is a 17-4%, followed by a 24%, followed by a 25-4%. For most of the small canals, that is sufficient, such as your mesial mandibular canals, mesiobuccal and mesiolingual, even your buccal canals for your maxillary molars, MB and DB, that will do. Yeah, that is pretty much it. Okay, these are the canals with which this is the sequence of instrumentation. Usually that works. I'm not telling you this is the sequence. I'm just telling you one sequence which I find that works. So you go with your 17.4% usually colored white, 24% usually colored yellow, 25.4% usually colored red, all having a single ring, single white, yellow or red band on their handle. Now, at this point, you need to check whether this enlargement is sufficient. You can get a sense how easily this thing went in and came out, whether this fits that canal size or not. You're able to judge that. If you find that it requires some more enlargement all along, such as in maxillary premolars. In maxillary premolars, especially young premolars, you work some, you know that there is still a lot of space. Understood? In such cases, you can actually go up to the 34%, which is a blue ring, it's a blue single ring file. That usually is enough for those. And sometimes in young patients, when you have very wide canals in the mandibular molars and all, the mesial, sometimes they will require enlargement up to a 34%. That is safe. Usually do not have to enlarge anything more than that. That's done. Now, suppose after enlarging up to 25.4, you find that only the coronal area is the problem. Apically, actually, there is not much. It is actually, that gets that snug fit and then it becomes slightly loose. You understand that is more or less the shape the same, but coronal it is very wide. Classically, with your distal canals of mandibular molars or your palatal canals of maxillary molars. Classic with them. So in that case, after your 25.4, you can shift to your 25.6. You can even go up to your 36%. In some of the young teeth, sometimes even 25.6 will feel loose. So in such case, you can go up to the 36%. Many of the time, that is enough. Now, if even that is not found to be adequate, if it is still wider, then I suggest that you go with some hand instrumentation, circumferential filing, and auxiliary means of obturation. Or your single cones are not going to work. All right. So that is roughly one sequence. Let me tell you, this is not hard and fast. I want to repeat one of the points that I said earlier regarding the 6% 20. That is an instrument I dread personally, which is why I will like to, tell you guys that that is not at all a safe instrument. Use it with caution. Okay. Yeah, that is pretty much the sequence that you will require for majority of the cases. And then, see, this is one of the basic things that I'm telling you. Most of the times you can handle it with this. I did not mention about mandibular premolars. I did not mention about maxillary anteriors. Yeah, mandibular anteriors also many times up to 34 will do. Okay, just as I said for the mesials of mandibular molars and all, mandibular anteriors are also kind of safe like that. But with the mandibular premolars and the maxillary anteriors, it is highly unpredictable as to what size you will have to enlarge. That is definitely a case-by-case discussion, because they are the ones which usually do not conform to the general shapes and tapers of the rotary instruments that we normally have. All right, you have these specifically meant for anteriors, companies marketing like that. You may try any of those, but then the sequence doesn't really matter. They have actually given you the sequence. You just need to follow that. So that is regarding the thing. And one more point that I want to add at the end. I think I'm exceeding the time a little bit. I'll just take 2 more minutes. It's all 2 today. The thing is, you don't necessarily have to progress in this direction. Like I told you to start from 17.4 up to the working length, 24 up to the working length, 25.4 up to the working length, and then if required, 6% or 34, right? You can also do it in reverse. You can start with your 25.6%. You start with the 25.6%, what is going to happen is that is a crown down approach to things. All right. You're going to make the coronal area really wide. Then your 24%, your 25.4% will glide in very comfortably to a longer distance. Doesn't have to go up to the working length. Then your 24% can go even more comfortably. Then your 17.4% can go really up to the working length, comfortably glide into it. And then you can work backwards once again so that up to 25.4 will go up to the working length. All right, so that is the hybrid technique, crown down. You can call it by a lot of names. What I'm trying to say is that you can either start from the working length and keep on enlarging up to the working length, or you can start from the coronal aspect, go from the largest to the smallest. Make sure by the time you reach the smallest, you have reached the working length. Then repeat. That is this from the smallest. That is your 17.4% has reached the apex. Then your 24% has to reach the apex. 25.4 has to reach the apex. Then you decide further what to do. All right. So that is also one of the sequences which you can use. So that kind of sums up what we were planning to talk about today. And this is precisely what happens to me as a teacher for most part of the time. I have given so much of a description, and then at the end of it, in a class, I see several blank faces, and I'm like, what just happened? Okay. Right now, I'm not looking at any faces. I deliberately told them I don't want any faces, please. I don't want any distractions. I will just look at my slide. I hope I haven't lulled you to sleep. I hope this was not a lullaby. And I hope this has benefited you in some way. At least if you're taking home 2 points from this, I'll be more than grateful. And I doubt if we have time for too many questions, but I think, Dr. Anita, please,
Yes, ma'am.
we can field at least a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am. I'm moving on to the chat box, ma'am.
Just one more second. One more second.
Yes,
One more second.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, place my on record my thanks to the entire online dentistry team and my viewers. And I put this particular quote here because it's come from the internet. It says Phil Collins here. I'm not sure if he said that. But anyway, Phil Collins is an all-time favorite. He gave me another day in paradise. So I will trust anything that comes from his name. So that's why I just thought I'll put it there. So thank you very much. And now to the questions. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So the first question is from Dr. Ibrahim. Ma'am, is Neo Endo a good and effective option according to you? And also, do you think glass bead sterilization is fine or not?
Glass bead sterilization
is fine or not?
Is a thing of the past. You are not to use glass bead sterilizer. They don't work. Please do not use glass bead sterilizers. You need to autoclave. You need to autoclave your instrument after every use. Okay, and autoclaving also takes a toll on the cutting efficiency. That is a fact, but then nothing short of autoclaving will do. As for Neo Endo, personally, I feel Neo Endo is a little bit more aggressive to my choice. I want something with a little less cutting action. I'm more comfortable with something that is a little less cutting file. But a lot of my colleagues are using it and they seem to be working fine with it. I hope that answers yours.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is, ma'am, can you suggest a good root canal sealant?
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I got distracted a little bit. Video yes, just a second. I'm so sorry. No problem.
Ma'am?
Please. Yeah, can I get the question once, Anita? I didn't hear you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can you suggest a good root canal sealant? Root canal sealant.
My personal observation, anything based on zinc oxide eugenol works like a charm because eugenol is, I see that my internet connection is unstable. Do you have difficulty in hearing me?
We can hear you. Ma'am, we can hear you, but
I'll just stop the video for the time being so that I can save on the bandwidth. Okay. So yeah, right. The root canal sealers based on zinc oxide eugenol, the added advantage that they have is that eugenol being a good obtundant, it has a soothing effect on the neural fibers, right? So generally post-operative pain, I have found it quite less in cases where I have used this. Even if it extrudes a little bit, it doesn't cause too much of a problem. Whereas resin-based sealers, if they get extruded, they usually create some post-operative complaints. That is again, I'm not telling this based on scientific literature as such. There are no studies which have compared post-operative pain, but this is from my clinical experience. So I prefer any sealer which is based on zinc oxide eugenol, or I would even prefer a bioceramic sealer. Bioceramic sealers are wonderful because of the dispensing. It is so easy in the sense, if you're using a single cone technique, your entire obturation is over in 5 seconds. Trust me, I'm not exaggerating. 5 seconds is all you will take to obturate a molar. That is how easy the bioceramic sealer dispensing system is, and it has been reported. It is a new thing, so we don't have long-term results. But then the researchers are saying that they can work wonders. They are similar to MTH, so they should be perfectly conducive to an environment of healing. So zinc oxide eugenol or bioceramic are my choices.
Okay, ma'am. The last question for the night, ma'am, from Dr. Manisha. Ma'am, do you believe in single file systems and is it effective?
I do not believe in single file systems, my child. I am old school. I'm very, very, very old school like that. I do not have the satisfaction of having done an RCT unless and until I have used 3 or 4 files in it and so much of the irrigant and things like that. Now, there is one downside to single visit endodontics because you are spending so little time on cleaning on shaping. You have very little time. Your rotary instrument is doing so much of tremendous work. So you actually spend a little less time on the cleaning aspect. All right. So your irrigant is not really getting too much of time for working. Understood. And on top of that, you're not using an intracanal medicament also. So your irrigation has to be that effective, or else you're compromising significantly on the cleaning part. Right. Imagine if you're not even using so many number of files, your cleaning time is cut down by so much. I worry. That's again my personal take. All right.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. It was indeed a wonderful session. And also thank you for being with online dentistry. So here we come to the end of the session.
Thanks.
So stay tuned till next second Wednesday for another punching session from online dentistry. Thank you all. Good night. Bye, ma'am.
Good night.
Good night.